Mermaids, led by Susie Green, have been very vocal in their lobbying of the public and clinical practices in the UK. This includes the Tavistock, where their involvement prompted the resignation of 35 staff members over a 3-year period. One of them remarked that this experimental treatment is being done not only on children, but very vulnerable children who have experienced mental health difficulties, abuse or family trauma, but sometimes those other factors just get whitewashed. Mermaids have also been accused of bigoteering at the clinic, putting pressure on the service to place young people on medical transition pathways for fear of being deemed transphobic, even if this goes against their better judgment. Susie Green and Mermaids campaign to actively push for the time limits around medical transitioning and puberty blockers being given to young people to be reduced, claiming that such intervention needs to be fast in order to be life-changing and life-saving. Green and the organisation have often used a 48% suicide rate figure to justify their position, despite, as we've pointed out, this figure coming from a study of just 27 self-selected young trans people, of whom 13 reported having attempted suicide. Mermaids have also been accused of misrepresenting this study. There's no question at all that some young people will and do suffer from gender dysphoria, and in some cases a medical transition approach may be the best option for them. That's not what we or anyone else is disputing here. We're simply pointing out that the evidence appears to suggest that this isn't the case for everyone, and that it certainly doesn't appear to be the cure-all that Mermaids states it is. But Mermaids are supported very vocally by trans rights activists and their supporters, with people like Owen Jones, Prince Harry and others all lending their support to the charity, who also receive lottery funding. And despite their campaigning and Green herself appearing in the media quite often to promote their charity, it appears they are unwilling to answer questions about their methods or motives. The filmmaker Ollie Lambert, who reached out to Mermaids for a documentary he was producing in 2018, said that Mermaids work hard to shut down any debate rather than enter into it and win support, and that during documentaries he had filmed on the Arab-Israeli conflict for the BBC, he found it was easier to get an interview with Hamas and the IDF than it was with Susie Green. Trans rights activists and their supporters have been incredibly quick to launch attacks on any reports of ROGD, claiming that it doesn't exist, that Dr. Littman's research was flawed, and that increased rates of referral are being seen because being transgender is now more acceptable in society, which may be a good point, except if this was truly the case, the numbers of people wanting to change their gender would be more even across all age ranges, both male and female, rather than specifically teenage or younger girls. Anyone questioning this is almost immediately met with bigoteering attacks from trans rights activists, who will claim these questions amount to transphobia. Graham Linehan being one example of this, who was constantly and consistently targeted by trans rights activists for questioning Mermaids and the Tavistock.
You've been vilified on social media, and that you've even lost work as a result of speaking out in this trans debate.
There's protests, they get shut down. Kathleen Stock had a freedom of information request about her emails. You know, it's insane, the abuse and harassment they face. Children are basically being experimented on with puberty blockers. Lupron, which is a drug that's supposed to be meant for end-stage cancer prostate cancer treatment, is being given to young girls. It has never been tested on girls. It has never been tested on women. If you look at the Tavistock, 35 psychologists have quit the Tavistock in 3 years. Does that sound...
That's one of the centres which deals specifically with people who think that they want to change their gender.
Yes, that's 35 over 3 years. Do you think that sounds like a healthy environment for children?
I've no idea what the reason why people might be leaving are, but I know children being able to come forward and talk about issues that they feel, it's entirely up to them whether or not they want to do that. Nobody's forcing anybody into
I'm sorry.
here.
You don't tell children that they were born in the wrong body, because they're children and they will believe you. That's the... I've seen kids... there are reports from the Tavistock that children as young as 4 were brought in. These are children, children are still believing in Santa when they're 10. It's It's ridiculous. It's absurd. One of the other things that Tavistock whistleblowers reported was that homophobic parents were bringing in their gender non-conforming kids and telling them to fix them. You know, there was a dark joke that went around the Tavistock where they said that in a couple of years there'll be no gay people left. You know, now that's why I compare it to eugenics programs and things like that. It is extremely serious. And all I'm asking for is that people like me and the women that I support are not attacked. Their meetings aren't protested. They aren't abused on Twitter. I've been sued. Yeah, okay. I've been reported to the police.
I know you have.
My wife's address has been published online.
And
all these things have happened because I'm trying to make the conversation less toxic. Trans activists threaten the feminists I support with rape and death threats, okay? So the idea that there's an equivalence between these two, I am absolutely happy to step out of this conversation completely once women like Kathleen Stock and Jane Clare Jones are allowed to speak.
There might be quite a lot of women think that they can speak for themselves, thank you, and they don't necessarily need Graham Linehan to come in and talk for us.
Well, the women I support value my support and are glad that I'm amplifying their voices. This is a hinge moment in history. We ask ourselves, what would I have done? Would I have bowed down? Would I have done everything I was told to do? Or would I have resisted? Would I have stood up, and would I have stood up alongside people who were trying to do the right thing? That's what I'm trying to do at the moment. And it's being made very, very difficult. Look, 2 years ago, we wrote to Stonewall and we said, could we please bring down the toxicity of this conversation? Could we please just look at some of these issues, some of these points where women's rights conflict with trans rights, and just talk about it. And within the day, Stonewall said no. They said absolutely not.
So they said to us today, we invited them to come on the programme, and instead they gave us a statement saying trans people in Britain face huge levels of abuse in all areas of their life. They quote statistics showing that hate crimes against trans people have increased 37% in the last year, and say they're proud of their work towards trans equality.
Yes, but the reason hate crimes have increased is because everything is now transphobic, including saying statements like, men aren't women. These are considered transphobic statements. So the reason that these hate crime figures are going up is because the bar has been set so low for what is and isn't transphobic. There has to be a conversation about this. It is absolutely crucial.
The trans rights activists do not use evidence in their attacks, though, and appear to have no accurate facts to back up their assertions that young trans people will commit suicide unless they transition. They've also attacked detransitioners like Keira Bell, claiming that they weren't truly trans to begin with, which, illogically, is precisely the point that Bell is making. And they all stick to the line that trans women are women, and that there should be no debate or discussion around this.
Well, it's estimated that around 48 children a week are now being referred to the Tavistock and Portman Trust, which is the NHS's first transgender clinic specifically for children.
Well, a mother of a 15-year-old girl with autism is now taking legal action against the clinic to try to stop them giving her daughter hormone blockers after claiming the centre misinform families and rush into treatment without proper assessment.
Well, former Tavistock therapist Sue Evans is now speaking out about this.
When I was there were about 100 children a year referred, whereas now there's about 2,000. There were certain clinicians who would refer children after maybe 4 or 5 meetings, and I found that to be shocking. I didn't think it was enough to send a child off for hormone treatment at such a young age with so little investigation into really what was going on in their life.
What age are you talking about?
There are children as young as 11 or 12 who might be offered these blockers.
People being threatened with legal action by the mother of a patient aged 15 who has autism over its use of experimental treatments for children as young as 11. The case argues that hormone-blocking treatments are being unlawfully administered to children who cannot properly consent.
What I know from clinicians who've left the service recently that I've been in touch with, and they were the people who blew the whistle anonymously, is that they said that sometimes children were referred to the clinic for hormones. The informed consent is a form that they go through with the children, but the problem is it's an experimental drug. It's used off licence, which means it was licensed for some other condition, precocious puberty, but now they're giving it to children with gender dysphoria. And many parents are really concerned about it because we don't think children of 11 or 12 understand the ramifications of signing up to something so early in their lives. And also there's a sort of political pressure which is taking children much quicker towards a one solution. And I want to sort of say that I'm not about saying this should never be the treatment for children. I believe there are a small minority of children who ultimately, for them, this is the answer. You know, this is going to help them. But I think children, when they come as adolescents, it's a difficult time. There's massive psychological change going on. The evidence base for the current treatment just isn't there, and it needs to change.
You said earlier that an 11-year-old may not understand the side effects of going through with this treatment. What are you suggesting those side effects are?
I've spoken with endocrinologists, and they say there's, in later life, risk of cardiac disease, of stroke. There's certainly, if people have surgery, sexual dysfunction. Children are given blockers in Tanner stage 2, which is early puberty, which could be these children of 11 or 12. And then they progress through to the cross-sex hormones, which at the moment, according to the GIDS service, they are nearly 100% doing so. You are effectively sterilising the child because they won't be able to produce either sperm or eggs.
Bob, with us, this is quite an extraordinary number of children, and this teacher thinks that a number of them are autistic, and that somehow might be having an influence on their decision. Is there a connection?
About 35% of the people who attend the Tavistock Child Clinic are autistic.
Which is the only clinic which deals with
yeah, so there's
children.
a disproportionately high number. I think it's maybe about 1% in the general population. I might not be sure of that, but just say why I'm concerned, if you don't mind, because the very first person that I saw 25 years ago was somebody who'd been living as a woman for 9 years and had fully transitioned, and then came to realise that it was a big mistake, at which point, of course, I'm sorry, it's breakfast television, but he'd lost his penis, and it was really a deep tragedy for him. He was very suicidal, very depressed, and he got into psychoanalysis with me and recovered, but he really wished that he'd had psychoanalysis before he'd surgically transitioned. And in a way, that's why I'm so passionate about this.
Of the referrals to the Tavistock clinic we were talking about, right? 2 were 4 years old, 13 were 5 years old,
Oh, my goodness.
30 were 6 years old. Again, how can this possibly be right? I've had 4 kids. They don't know what the hell they're bloody choosing for breakfast, let alone what sex they want to be. How can this be right that we're referring kids of this age for potential surgery to change their sex?
Well, again, this is all wrong because nobody gets referred for surgery at that age.
The fact is that nearly 100% of the people who get put on puberty blockers go on to full medical transition.
That's not actually true. Can I just mention the fact that we have something called the World Health Organization? There's a consensus of opinion here. Prior to puberty, because
what's the consensus about?
The consensus is the treatment of people who
have but all I'm saying is that the Tavistock Clinic says 95% of people who go on puberty blockers go on to full medical transition. A study by De Vries in 2011.
No, but we can play statistical tennis.
No, it's
I've
not.
Got as many
OK, well, let's forget the statistics.
Yours.
How are we going to prevent unnecessary transitions with regrets? Can we agree that if anybody transitions and ends up regretting it, they will have lost their fertility, they may regret it, their sex life is very likely to be seriously impaired.
But you're looking through from the perspective of somebody who wants to keep the anatomy that would do that. Transgender people in my situation don't want to keep it. We embrace losing it.
Can we protect these children? That's what I'm saying.
Of course we're protecting it. Everyone's looking after it.
It's about children.
Of course.
And as we all know, children haven't made their minds up about very much at all, and they're exploring their identity. And what people are concerned about is that something might be put in place that they may regret, may change their minds about, may not really know about, may be influenced. You know, this report referred to people being influenced by YouTube stars.
Yeah. Ruby began identifying as male at 13 years old. Now 21, she'd been planning to have surgery to remove her breasts. But in May, she made the decision to come off testosterone and detransition to identify as female, her sex at birth. She doesn't want to be identified, so we've changed her name.
I figured it would be better for me to try to deal with my gender dysphoria in a different way, rather than permanently changing my body.
How much support did you feel was out there for you when you came to this conclusion?
I didn't feel like there was any support out there, other than like a few friends online.
Ruby now feels her eating disorder was more of a factor than she first realised in her gender dysphoria.
None of the therapists that I spoke to brought that up. They didn't think that it was linked.
Do you?
I think so, yes, because they're both kind of based in how I feel about my body, so I've seen similarities between the two.
Charlie Evans is forming a charity to support people in Ruby's position. After going public with her detransition story, she discovered an online community of 5,000 in a similar position, 30 people alone in her area of Newcastle.
I was approached by a young woman with a beard, and she hugged me and said, I'm a detransitioned woman as well, I've just stopped taking testosterone. And after that I felt like I had to do something. I'm hearing from hundreds of people, and I think some of the common characteristics are they tend to be around their mid-20s, they're mostly female and mostly same-sex attracted, most are lesbians, and often autistic as well.
This idea that it is easy is in complete contrast to the experiences we hear every single day. You know, the process is rigorous, and the process is there to ensure that any decision made is the right one for that person. We mustn't use these experiences to suggest that everybody is being dealt with in a way that suggests they're being pressured or made into being trans. That's incorrect. You can't make someone be trans.
Anna Hutchinson says it's unquestionable that they need support.
The burden of treatment for people who are trans-identified is very significant. Even for those for whom it works, it might involve foregoing fertility, it will certainly involve, or usually involves reliance on medication for the whole of your life and often surgery. Now, some people are more than happy to live with that burden of treatment because it works for them. However, there are a group for whom it won't work, and that creates a situation where there's almost a double burden, that they have to live with all of those changes that they've undergone, and it still hasn't helped alleviate their distress.
What's really, really important is to ensure that this experience isn't used to pressure other people. It shouldn't be used to tell those who are trans, those who are gender diverse, that they're wrong or different. It's about creating a system that makes everybody feel validated.
Well, Dr. Elizabeth Van Horn is a consultant psychiatrist in gender identity services at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust.
What we know from our population is that actually well less than 1% of our population choose to detransition.
Isn't that the point? That we don't know that number is small because we don't know the number. Many that we talk to just said they can't return to the Tavistock for whatever reason that is. And your duty of care presumably should be to find out how people are feeling, to find out what has happened afterwards, where there isn't the extensive medical research or evidence to take care of those people.
I wouldn't disagree with you at all, and I would actually encourage anybody who's in that situation to go and see their GP and to seek to get a referral back to a gender identity.
But it's not just about going back, is it? It is a concern that you're putting people on these pathways without enough evidence of the treatment or of the long-term consequences of what that treatment is doing. This can be life-changing treatment in many situations and circumstances, and that pathway is something that you're putting people on without the requisite evidence.
Well, I accept that we can always have a better evidence base. I don't accept that there is no evidence base. I think it depends on how you define your evidence base.
I'm just curious because the NHS is meant to be dispassionate, isn't it? It is for people to have faith in all treatments, whether it is a disease, a cancer, an asthma or a gender reassignment. It has to be peer-reviewed. It has to be evidence-based research. It's not enough to say we fail to be
clinically curious or acquire the relevant data and evidence that we need to make sure this is right?
I think that's both harsh and inaccurate, actually. I mean, I think a lot of research has gone on over the years. I think that it's quite difficult to do very long-term research in any field. And if you're looking at people's reactions to transitioning, and you're looking at what happens 5, 10, 15, 20 years, very few studies will ever be set up that will actually take that into consideration. If you look at hang on,
let me just ask you about the numbers, okay? Because the numbers are astonishing, that we know that in the last 4 years, the number of adults and children being referred to gender identity clinics has more than doubled. It's now at 8,000. Now, what do you attribute that to?
I don't know. I don't think any of us know.
But why aren't you finding out? I mean, you can't just say, I don't know and we're not looking into it.
I didn't say that. I said we don't know.
Well, are you looking into it?
And we probably won't know until some time has passed. But we are faced in a day-to-day...
Are you looking into it? A really simple question.
Can I just... Please.
Are you looking into it?
We are faced in a day-to-day situation with extremely distressed people coming to us, and we are trying to give them the best health care that we can.
Of course, and when you have people coming through your door, you need to have the research to understand why. So are you looking into it? Can you explain, for example, why more than 75% of those referred to you are assigned female at birth? Do you know that?
No, not yet, we don't, no.
So in that gap between not knowing and not doing the research...
And equally, Emily, prior to that, we didn't know why the majority of people that were being referred to our service were assigned male at birth.
If you do not understand the cause, how can you direct people on the right path when this could be a life-changing moment? I mean, is it enough to say, we don't know, and actually there is no body of research I can point to that is investigating this, we're dealing with whoever comes in the door? It's not enough. When you hear gender dysphoria can often be part, or sometimes be part, of a complex web of issues, isn't it really important how you untangle those issues so that you don't actually say, oh, we can't start looking at quantitative results, we can't start looking at numbers. These are numbers that you have to look at because they...
I'm not saying hang on, I'm not saying for a moment that we're not going to look at quantitative numbers. We're
not going to look at, but these numbers are here, they're in front of you, and I can't see you telling me that you're looking at data or you're looking at research now that is actually going to try and help you put these people on the right path for them. That's what's missing.